Right off the bat in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 2, he says, "Consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials." Joy in various trials, joy in suffering. How does one do that? That's something that I have been struggling with for many years now, especially recently, and then I have a pretty sneaking suspicion that I'm not the only one. So I wanted to make this two-part video series to address that. Now, this isn't a comprehensive guide. It's not a step-by-step instruction manual. This is just kind of some principles and key points to what God has been teaching me recently. Mostly for my benefit, I'm being honest, but hopefully this helps you too, whether you're currently suffering, having some trials right now, or if you're not, don't worry, they're coming. So hopefully we can get you equip you with some tools to be ready when the time comes. Now, address the elephant in the room. The very immediate following verses 3 and 4, gives us kind of a clue, right? So James then says, "Because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its full effect so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing." And then again, elsewhere in the Bible, Paul says in Romans 5, verses 3 and 4, "Because we know that affliction produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope." Those are outstanding points and things that we definitely need to take into account, right? Good comes out of it. Anybody who's spent any time reading the Bible knows this, but believing it while living through it, that's a whole other story right there. So let's go a little bit beyond some of these, let's be honest, often churchy type answers, because while those verses that I just read are outstanding and definitely something we need to keep in mind, and we're going to come back to those, I always felt like that wasn't the complete picture. There was a little more to it beyond that. So I kind of want to dive in, and you know what? Let's just go straight to Job. Probably the ultimate case study in suffering, right? So we're just going straight into it. Now, I've always felt drawn to the book of Job, but I never knew why, because I'd read it a few times, especially when I was like struggling, and I was like, cool, there is something here. I can't quite put my finger on it. There's some good tidbits I got, but only recently did I kind of discover the main point of the entire book. So first, in the beginning, Job suffers terribly. This is not good, right? If you've even heard of the story, you know that that's arguably one of the worst forms of suffering you can go through. It's just a bad deal, right? And then, shortly after that, 3 friends come and visit him. Now, these 3 friends in Job, their interactions kind of take up the majority of the book at this point, and there's a lot of back and forth. But essentially, snapshot, the bulk of that is the wisdom of the modern day world at that time. Like these 3 friends, everything they're discussing is the worldly wisdom of the time. They're trying to figure out why this happened, what we can do to fix it, what we can do to prevent it. And, you know, at the end, even though all the worldly wisdom that can possibly be put in there is thrown in there, at the end, Job is still, he doesn't have answers. He has nothing, right? So after all this, finally, towards the end of the book, God speaks. And here's the crazy part, and this is what I had a really hard time wrapping my mind around. So at no point does God offer Job an explanation. He really doesn't even address the suffering that Job went through, that God allowed to happen. He didn't even address it directly. Instead, God goes off on a rather long but amazing description of how God sees his creation. Just the vastness, the beauty, how big things are, how so many things go together in ways that we as humans just can't understand, right? So the answer, or the explanation that God gives Job is essentially, hey, I know you're suffering. I know this is not good for you, but look at this world that I've created. Look at the beauty, the vastness, the greatness. Look at everything, right? Can you not see that there are things that I'm aware of that you couldn't possibly be aware of? Can you see how over everything I am? Can you see how much more there is than you in this situation? Essentially saying, Job, can you trust me? Can you trust that there might be a reason? Can you trust that there are things going on that you can't understand? Can you trust me? That's the point of the book. All this suffering, all these explanations, no explanation is given except trust God. So, kind of the first major point, and really the main point I want to get across in this first video, because I think this is probably the first paramount thing to wrap your mind around before you can start addressing some of the other stuff. According to those verses we read earlier with James and Paul, there is a purpose in your suffering. There is a purpose in the trials. There are many times when we probably won't know why. We may not even ever be given a solution to it. For some people, it may not end. At least not in this life, right? And that's hard to wrap our mind around, but can we understand that there are things bigger than us? Can we understand that there are things connected that we can't see or know? Think about this for a second, and this thought really only just hit me not that long ago. And I apologize if there's theologians out there that know more about this than me and are going to say I'm wrong. It's still a thought that hit me, and I think it's really powerful. With that terrible suffering that Job went through, it seems the only purpose that I can derive out of it was so that Job and we would learn that we should trust God, that we should trust that there is a purpose in the suffering, there's a purpose in the trials. We should trust. So before I move on to the next video and some of the other stuff, in the next video I'm going to get, I don't want to say a little more practical, but for all intents and purposes a little bit more practical, and cover a lot more material. I really feel like this paramount point is something that I want you to take some time. So before you watch part 2 of this video, take some time, whether that be a few hours, maybe a few days, maybe even a few weeks, and prayerfully think, can I trust that there is a purpose for this? Can I trust that God really is in control? Do I trust that God is in control? Do I trust that good things are going to come of this? Ultimately, do I trust God?